Greetings, Dr. Joseph Martin here for you. 120 years of psychotherapy, and the world is more of a Holocaust than it's ever been. We want to look at what the history of psychology has been, what it has done or not done, actually, more to the point, for individuals who've gone through psychotherapy, and what we need to do to switch it up and change it up at this time. So, as most of you would know, psychotherapy has only been around for about 120 years. Just before the turn of into the 1900s, Freud came out with his book on dreams, the interpretation of dreams. And then there were others right at that time. Alfred Adler with his will to power, Carl Jung with his focus on individuation and finding your spiritual self and core, and Wilhelm Reich with bioenergetics, the start of all that, and Viktor Frankl and the will to meaning and the finding purpose in life, and many, many others, Erich Fromm with the art of loving, and others as well. Now, I had the good fortune to train starting in the early mid 1960s, so that's 50 years ago, with most of these people and or their students in person, actually, so that was great. I'd like to suggest that psychotherapy is dead. We need a new one, and my next two videos will show us how and why. The reasons for this are many. I'll start with just saying, and I'm saying this in a nice way, my experience of my colleagues is, whether they're psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, Jungian analysts, and so on, and many, many others, I love and bless them, and I wish them well. And I would support them and encourage them and inspire them indeed to go further in their own individuation process by looking more at their deeper hidden issues, not just from childhood, but as you know, karmic emotional release is a big part of what I've been sharing with you worldwide. And also the fact that there are intrinsic issues around the shadow and our aggressiveness and our need for somehow to transmute the bloodlust and the murderousness that we all have inside ourselves. So I'll just put that out there. But apart from that, 50 years ago, there was a movement in psychology and psychotherapy called the anti-psychiatry movement. Some of you may be familiar with it. It was more or less started by Dr. R.D. Laing, Ronald Laing from Edinburgh University. He has books on anti-psychiatry. He just felt that psychoanalysis and psychiatry in large are not doing any good for the people that were being treated. Freud suggested the best that one could do, and remember that psychiatry, particularly psychoanalysis, derives from Freud's view of what a treatment is meant to be. Freud said that all you can do is find out your childhood neuroses and then just live with them. To suffer because you know a little bit more about them, but emotionally there's no transformation, and there's therefore no cure and no treatment. And that's how the anti-psychiatry movement got started. People thought, well, that's ridiculous. Why spend all this time and hard-earned money if that's all we're going to do? Live a bland, depressed, non-existent life of suffering and pain just because we know what happened in our childhood. And as you know, all my videos and my own personal story, which is online, you can go back and find that video of my own personal story of all the challenges and abuse that I went through as a baby and as a child. And that's the substance of my book, actually, my autobiography, Living in Two Worlds, A Life of Love. You can find that online as well, Amazon.com, Amazon.ca. R.D. Laing, who I had the pleasure of doing some education with 2 times in Ontario back in the day, was prominent in showing that psychiatry is going off on a tangent and probably a dead end. And as we know now, psychiatrists only give you medication. Psychological medication that changes your brain chemistry and your neuroendocrine system and your neuroses and so on. But it's a very poor substitute that doesn't treat the cause or causes, only the symptoms. And as we know, there are many negative, detrimental effects, even like murderous, suicidal effects of taking some of these psychiatric medications. I'll leave that alone. Back to where we've gone with psychology and psychotherapy in 120 years. This talk is actually based on a book by James Hillman and Michael Ventura from 1994. James Hillman, when, in my estimation, is probably one of the greatest critical thinkers in Jungian psychology, depth psychology, and archetypal psychology. I had again the good fortune to work with James in a number of situations where he was talking about the need to focus on the feminine, the soul, the anima, and connect with animals and nature. More of that as part of the cure for all this um, um, change we need to see in psychotherapy and clinical work. Now, as I said, psychoanalysis just tells you what your problems are and then says suffer with it for the rest of your life. That's a very simplistic view, but in fact it's true. And psychiatry is just, giving you drugs, and that never even touches the causes of all your pain and challenges and issues that you need to transform. And marriage and family therapy, having been a very well-trained marriage and family therapist and taught courses in it at the University of Guelph all through the 1980s, I can suggest that it doesn't touch the individual and your individual issues. There's no real depth of introspection or dealing with the shadow, the ego, emotional complexes, or archetypal issues. Instead, it says that we need to look at the systems of the family, the dysfunctional systems of family, society, education, peers, and social institutions, and try to figure out how you're going to fit into an increasingly dysfunctional, fragmented set of social and family systems. We know, for instance, and I used to teach courses on this, that the rate of divorce in families and also dysfunction, destability, and actually vicious fights and challenges within marital systems and family systems, in terms of, even we have lots of cases of murder within family systems, just shows that increasingly culturally, historically, the family and the social systems are devolving, and that's an important point to note. So marriage and family therapy, which in fact and to some degree was a very conservative religious-based American institution that we all trained in, those of you who are MFTs, actually is not the solution either, because there's a whole bunch of causes that have been left out in that set of I'd say, like somewhat non-centered psychotherapy. Now, in the last 20 years, there's lots of new kinds of psychotherapy that you can train in that people are using now. If you're a clinician listening to this and you're in your 30s or 40s, you probably trained in some of these things and you know what I'm speaking about. Narrative psychology or psychotherapy, as important it is to know your story and to live a life-changing storyline on a timeline and know where you've been and where you are and where you'd like to go. Narrative psychotherapy actually doesn't really work that well. And the reason for that is simple. It doesn't dig deep enough to the shadow side, the dark side, the inner hidden child, the children or child, the inner child, the victim mentality, and the deep hidden emotional complexes that need to be brought to the fore. Now, the set of psychotherapeutic techniques that did work over the last 120 years are these. Jungian depth dream analysis and psychology and psychotherapy, where the unconscious gets a chance to speak through dreams, visions, passive imagination, and active imagination. And then beyond that, the techniques that Dr. Milton Erickson proposed and I trained in as well, which is medical hypnotherapy, in order to uncover all the early unconscious childhood issues. And furthermore, and even more deeply important, rebirthing. and holotropic breath work. Now, I would choose, although I've trained extensively and used both of these, I choose rebirthing because that is the technique that goes the deepest and most profoundest, other than Jungian dream analysis and depth psychology, archetypal complexes, personal and collective. Because rebirthing is a chance through joining the energy fields of the physical body with the breath and the willpower and the emotions and the mind, the conscious, the unconscious, the superconscious, helps you get down to the soul, to what Jung calls the self, to what we call in Advaita Vedanta the Atman, the one universal Atman that we're all just one part of. And of course, in our way with the First Nations, we call it the source, the creator. Songwayatizo in Mohawk. All these techniques do work, and I would highly suggest you either train in these or you go to a professional who has a background in these so that you can go deeper with yourself, because that's the need. You need to go beyond depression, loneliness, sadness, anger, anxiety, neuroses, obsessive compulsiveness, and addictions to a place where you can go to the bottom of the shadow and the collective unconscious and the archetypal realities and find some wholeness, some peace, some joy, some bliss, some higher consciousness, some awakening, some attention on the spirit, the soul, the source, the self in the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual heart, and go to the key, the core of your whole being. And that's my suggestion for that. But I want to point out here actually what the challenge and problems are. I don't like using the word problems, but we are in entire straits here, so let's analyze this, because unless we know what the challenges are and the problems, we don't know how to address them and find a way through this morass and this terrorizing society of fear, anxiety, and depression and loneliness that we're living in, all of us worldwide. Now, I'd also like to point out that there's a lot of New Age psychotherapy there. There are lots of books, and I've read them all because a lot of my friends write these books, and they've been writing them since the 1970s and 1980s. What I'd like to say this in all kindness, but in all clarity, and the point being this, is when the New Age spirituality, psychology, is a sort of a saccharine way of dealing with the issues in a way that doesn't deal with our dark side, our shadow, our aggressiveness, our bloodlust, all these dark parts of ourselves that we know is part of human nature. Just look at war in the history of humanity. These saccharine lies, and I'll call them lies because they're not truly human nature, the structure and function of who we are and how we tick. And it doesn't do us any good to get these saccharine kinds of psychotherapies or treatments or books that say, oh, you just love somebody, just be kind, just be gentle. It's like putting lovely ice cream topping on a pile of shit. It's still going to taste like shit when you eat it. Or it's like putting lovely ice cream on a fire, a burning fire, because the ice cream is just going to melt. And that fire, that raging aggression or anger or fear or anxiety, remember all anger is based on hidden fear. That's why people go raging. That's causing all these issues. As James Hillman and Michael Ventura said in their book, by repressing all these anxieties and neuroses and even psychoses and these splits and this insanity inside us, this madness, by repressing it and just trying to have a modicum of just a balanced, kind of bland, life of fitting into society, the marriage and the white picket fence and all this, or the 9-to-5 job, which we all hate anyways, that if you repress that in individuals in society, because psychotherapy has not been dealing with it, we end up with what we have. That anger, that rage, that frustration and aggression has erupted in the collective worldwide, whereby now it's because we repressed it individually and in psychotherapy, now it's erupting all over the world. ISIS, the Taliban, 9/11, on and on and on, all the internal and external wars, more and more and more. And so this is a psychological social reality that we need to consciously awaken to and understand, and then we need to know what we can do to change this. I'm just trying to point out in this first video of 3 what the challenges are and what the situation actually is in the early 21st century. Now, according to James Hillman and Michael Ventura in this book, we've had 100 years of psychotherapy, and where are we now? They show that, what's happening is that people aren't really getting healed. They're not feeling better. They're not resolving their issues. In fact, there's more marital fighting, there's more adultery, there's more lies and cheating, there's more criminality in the business world and in the government world and so on. And there's more social fracturing and fragmentation in all our institutions, the banking institution, the justice system, which some people call the injustice system, and the treatment of women, the treatment of ethnic minorities, the treatment of gays and lesbians. Even though we seem to have more rights, the treatment isn't right there and available and changed within the social mores and values. And so to this point, we'd say that what is missing is that there's a hidden inner madness inside us. Now, madness in the sense of, we live in an insane society. I mean, how insane is it to, over decades and centuries, build a culture, arts and music and architecture and a so-called civilized society, and then periodically, seemingly it used to be every 80 years, then it was 60 years, and now over 40 years, have a war, or even 30 years between the First and the Second World War, and then the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, and on and on and on. More periodically, because we're also repressed in terms of our shadow side. To have these wars which destroy everything that we've built up. That's the definition of an insane human species and an insane human society. The evidence is clear. We need to change and understand ourselves more clearly so we can find peace within and then find peace without. Part of the challenge that Hillman and Ventura brought up was that people who do any psychotherapy have been very narcissistic about it and selfish about it, to think that, I'll just spend my money and make myself feel a little bit better and tell people that I have a psychotherapist or a psychologist. But they don't engage in any social or cultural political action to make it better for other people. And anything that's wholesome and creating wholeness needs to make a change within the individual and then take it to the world to make other people have the same equality, sense of justice, liberation and freedom and truth seeking as well. Now, inherent in all this inner madness we are speaking of is some kind of archetypal invocation, I would say, from gods and goddesses, however you choose to think of the source or spirit, the creative oneness of all that is. There's a hidden inner kind of urge or madness to try to break free of all these social prisoning institutions and values that we all hate, but we all live in. To break free of the masks of unreality, the masks of lies, the masks of white lies, the masks of everything that imprisons us in the way that you can just get an image of Darth Vader with this imprisoning mask. And we are all on the road to becoming that unless we choose our freedom. And we need to do that now before it's too late. And so this inner hidden God-given kind of wildness, this kind of what we call the Dionysian side, the desire for freedom, for connection to the light, for connection to the perfection of creation inside us, the connection to the wildness of nature, of animals, of trees and forests and plants, and of the great mystery at large. This wildness, which we know in terms of all the bipolarities we have in society, the Apollonian is the side of the socialized, civilized, intellectual, and the Dionysian is the wild man inside. And of course, there have been other books on the need for the wild man through Robert Bly and others as well. And have been some men's groups to help people, guys, go back into nature and try to find their wild side. But I say it doesn't go deep and far enough, and it doesn't hold, because I've been involved in them myself. We need to touch and feel and grow our roots into the depths of the wildness, which is our spirit, our freedom, our truth, our honesty, our integrity, our courage, our strength, our capacity to take action to heal ourselves and move from victim to victor mentality. And also our capacity to have a selfless love and compassion to take action politically and socially and culturally on behalf of all the animals of the world and Mother Earth herself and all the peoples of the world, all the minorities of whatever kind, women in particular, gays, lesbians, and transvestites as well, and all the ethnic and religious minorities, the Zoroastrians, the Baha'is, and others, and so on, that are being persecuted and killed in many of the countries of the world. So this is the key to all of this now. We need to understand that we've been alienated from ourself, and psychotherapy hasn't helped. It hasn't gone deep enough. Alienated from our true deep self with a capital S. We have not individuated to the point where we've become whole, integrated, honest, loving, kind, respectful, responsible people. And that's the key to all of the places where we need to go. So the suggestion for the next 120 years for psychology and psychotherapy would be this, and stay tuned for videos 2 and 3. I will explicate what those are and how that could work for all of us, individually and collectively. Now, also, besides the social activism and so on that we need to partake of in an honest way, and it's important to think of this in an honest way, I think the key is this: we are not connected energetically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually to nature, to Mother Earth. The key is always to connect to the mother, whether we talk of this in psychological terms with Freud or Jung or Adler or anyone else, or in particular in broadening to the anima mundi, which means the soul of the earth, the soul of Mother Earth. We need to feel an ongoing connection to that. In my own personal process through my life, the one major thing that's made the difference is when I embodied and have a permanent, ongoing conscious relationship with Mother Earth. Part of that is because I am a native man, and it's our part of our tradition and heritage to stay connected to Earth, but also because I chose to spend a lot of time alone or in small groups, canoeing, hiking, tripping, enjoying nature, listening, meditating outside as I do every day now, to listen to the birds, listen to spirit, listen to synchronous messages, and let synchronicity play a part in all of this. And to love the birds and the animals, the deer, the rabbits, and all the other ones, and to learn that we're just a part of all this. This deep connection with Mother Earth is what's been missing in psychotherapy. Whatever it is you do, and stay tuned for number 3 video, which is on vision questing and connecting to Earth and nature and all our relations. Mitakui Oyasin. Now, I just want to end this particular video on the whole notion of love, because we have a very delusive, addictive, dysfunctional notion of what love is. Of course, we all want happiness, and for most of us, happiness comes when we're in love. And as you know the old saying, we all fall in love, and that's a madness unto itself, sometimes directed by synchronicity or the gods, if you like. But falling in love is dysfunctional and it's addictive because you have over-attachments to people. And what happens then is you lose yourself, and I mean that in terms of the spiritual, psychological core of your being in your heart, the capital S for self. But we initially fall into the madness, but we all know that love and the sexual pleasure and passion doesn't last for more than a few months or years. And then we're feeling depressed and sad and lonely and listening and only feeling that we're living memories in the past, and we're not really in the present. And that's why we have fights and divorce and so on, because we're always seeking that kind of love, and that is addictive and overly attached. But this is part of our challenge in the personal evolution of ourselves at this time on Earth, It's an evolutionary state that we need to move through, and we can. We have many guides as to how to do this, and this would be Jesus and Buddha primarily. They've shown us the way to move from addictive, overly attached love or connection with another human being and moved into a relationship with Source, Creator, Universe, Nirvana, the emptiness, the all that is, God, Goddess. All of these are just terms for the connection to the source of all that is in the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. Jesus, in his own relationship with his mother Mary and in his relationship with Mary Magdalene, proved that this is a workable set of propositions and life-changing values and activities, and in a deeply healing relationship. And Buddha himself as well, with all his students and his son as well, and his mother. So these are mentors, these are models that we need to follow when we fall into the addiction of love or sexual addictions or whatever it is, to come back to ourselves, pull back the consciousness and awareness that we've learned through these experiences, and that there's a deeper integrity and wholeness in learning to find that unconditional love, that non-attached deep love that is there. So the goal of psychotherapy for the next 120 years, so to speak, which will take us to what? 2134? It seems like a long time away, would be this: to focus on the light, the source, having gone to the bottom of the darkness and the depths of depravity that was part of our human nature and our social reality, with terrorism and everyone beheading other people, and these groups, these Islamic fundamentalist groups. But I also just want to point out this fact that the gods of the past become our demons of the future. And here I'm referring to the Christian fundamentalism in America in particular. These Christian fundamentalists who say that they're right and everybody else is wrong, project evil onto everybody else, they could be seen now and in the future as a demonic cult because they're so exclusive and they hate so many kinds of groups of people in the world. And, Jesus, who's probably the only great Christian, has always espoused love for God, first of all, following the will of God, and then love for all your neighbors. So that is the true message of Spirit. That's the true message of our upcoming and present psychotherapy and psychology, and how to see this. It has to move well beyond the science of psychology and social science to a deeply spiritual psychotherapy. And that's the key. Transpersonal psychotherapy that's transformational, involves daily work that have processes that you have to do through all the means, through dreams and active imagination, passive imagination, self-hypnotherapy, rebirthing, all these other techniques, being out in nature, meditating, yoga, all these things, art and creativity, to process all the dark shadow and go to the bottom of it and raise it up the columns and raise it up to the highest frequencies and consciousness. And this superconscious psychology is the way of the future, because what we've had so far has not worked, and that's clear to all of us who've been in the business all of these 40, 50 years. Along with joining up with the light, obviously, it's this unconditional love and getting to the place where you embody your original true divine human nature, which is perfect love, perfect trust, and perfect truth. Well, that's the story for now. Stay tuned for the next 2 videos. All my love and blessings to you, Dr. Joseph Martin.